Samir, throughout India's tenure as the chair of the G20, China seems to have worked to obstruct and challenge India's leadership in some way or the other, from small things like opposing Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam to, on issues like Russia, Ukraine, climate change, energy policies. China in various ministerial meetings has been described as adopting obstructive tactics. Why do you think they've had this role, given the fact that in Bali there was a joint declaration, a joint communique that all countries agreed to, whereas in all our ministerial meetings, we've struggled because of this kind of obstructionist attitude in coming up with language which everyone agrees on?
Rahul, let's be clear, even in Indonesia, the only communique that came out was a leader's communique. Everything else was a chair statement, and it's no different in the Indian presidency. So we are following pretty much the same formula this year until now. We'll of course have to see whether we get a communique out when the leaders meet. The Indonesians could manage that, but as a European diplomat observed this morning in one of the papers, this time both sides, EU and Russia, EU and US on the one hand, and China and Russia on the other, seem to be more entrenched and far more ideological in the disagreement that currently is on a particular formulation on the conflict. So we did not see any communiques come out before the leaders' summit, even in the Indonesian presidency. But yes, you're right. The Chinese see this as a political moment to minimize progress under the Indian presidency, not realizing that in the Sherpa track, where all the ministerial and other engagement groups meet, most of the work that happens is on a shaping role. They don't have executive powers to enforce any progress either on climate or on gender or on health or on any other matter. These are only discussions and discursive forums where ideas for the future are taken to the forums that have the executive, for example, the COP28, which is happening in. So whether you achieve agreements amongst the most influential actors who can then where the matter will be mediated and discussed. So that's one part of the answer, Rahul. I just want to pick up something that mentioned, very important point. I think what India has done is that it has actually changed the nature and I call it the People's G20. It has been taken, but more importantly, it has engaged a vast academics, civil society actors, farmers, fishers, all sorts of communities, a women-led growth model, a tech for development model. We have had a plethora of minds and actors participate. Millions and millions of Indians have participated. They have brought their counterparts from other G20 countries into the discussions as well. G20 will never be the same again. It will never be this high table where only the high and mighty meet and discuss matters that are not relatable to people. India has brought people into the rooms. It has also made the rooms more relatable to issues that matter to people. And it has, of course, as Kishore rightly mentioned, it has made Global South a visible participant in the process of the G20. So I think that has been the single biggest contribution. Ian is right. China was this GDP 15 years ago. The Indian GDP size today is China 15 years ago. It's a 15-year gap between the two countries. We should not be over-leveraging the India story, but we must realize that the India story is now on its way. It should have started 40 years ago. Maybe it is 40 years late, but the trajectory over the past few years gives me hope that in the next 15 to 18 years, we would pretty much be where China is today. And that would be a remarkable transformation that brilliant minds like Ian would have to contribute to, but also will also have to critically analyze, because it is going to change the world. The movement from $3.5 to $15 trillion is going to absolutely create a new basis for managing much of what the world today is engaged in.
Kishore Mehbubani, I want to spend a moment on the mindset at this moment of the Chinese president. I want to quote to you what Alfred Wu, Associate Professor at the National University of Singapore's Li Qiang School of Public Policy, said. He's describing Xi as being in an emperor mindset, who's expecting dignitaries to come to him. Leaders from Germany, France, 4 senior Biden administration lieutenants have visited Beijing since China lifted COVID-19 controls. He's essentially saying he enjoys the high status when he's receiving guests at home. In the policy moves that Xi Jinping has made during COVID and post, what's the mindset that you're picking up at the moment?
Well, I can tell you that China is one of the most difficult countries to understand. And I've tried my best to understand it. And so, for example, if you take the short term, Ian Bremmer is right. 2023 will be a difficult year for China for many reasons. Very difficult year. But what's going to happen in 2024, 2025? And I can tell you the conventional wisdom in the Western media is that, the China growth story is over, the people are tired, they're disillusioned. But there was also a story, by the way, in the Financial Times pointing out that the more dynamic sectors of China's economy continue to function very well, and China has overtaken Japan as the #1 exporter of cars. So that in China is complex story. There are and I'm really glad that India's economy is going to do very well. I share the optimism of Samir. It'd be wonderful for the world when India takes off too. But the global supply chain story again is something you cannot replicate what China has done overnight. It'll take a decade or more to do that. But your fundamental question is, what is the core thing in the Chinese mind? And there's a very simple answer. The core element in the Chinese mind is the century of humiliation that China suffered from 1842 to 1949. And if there's one psychological force that is thrusting China forward, it's the memories of the century of humiliation. And therefore, the Chinese have learned profound lessons as to why they got slapped by the West for 100 years effortlessly. And one of the lessons they learned, by the way, is that the reason why China collapsed is because it closed itself up, literally. So how does China come out? The answer is that the Chinese economy must remain open to the rest of the world.
But you heard what the US Commerce Secretary said during her visit to China recently, where she said because of the haphazard ad hoc economic policies, China is becoming increasingly uninvestable for international firms.
Well, I can tell you it's very simple. Go back to her statement 1 year from now, go back to her statement 2 years from now, and then watch the investment figures. Now, it is true, by the way, that I think Ian probably has the latest data. The flow of new investment, foreign investment into China has slowed down for many reasons, COVID and other reasons. But if you look at the investment in China, by companies inside China, are they reinvesting in China? And the answer is yes, they are. I mean, look at Tesla, okay? Tesla is one of the most successful companies in the world. What is Tesla doing? Tesla is betting on China. So, the Chinese story is very, very complicated. And it's a huge mistake to simplify it in any kind of way. But I can tell you also, and this is the one lesson I learned after studying China for 40 years or so, is never underestimate China. They have outperformed over 40 years against all expectations. It's safer to bet on a successful China, and then we have to deal with a stronger China. And the question is asked, how do we deal with that stronger China?